I found photos of myself inside a locked closet at an Airbnb. Let me start this by saying, I travel a lot for work. I'm a freelance photographer, so between gigs, I hop between cities, staying in Airbnbs. It's usually cheaper, cozier than hotels, and I like the personal touches people leave in their homes. At least, I used to like them. What happened in Asheville, North Carolina still makes my skin crawl. I stayed in this cute little A-frame cabin just outside the city. It looked like something out of a Pinterest board, exposed with beams, fairy lights strung across the patio, big windows with views of the forest. The reviews were glowing. Charming, private, a perfect romantic getaway. Except I was traveling alone. I arrived late afternoon. It had rained earlier, so everything smelled like wet pine and damp earth. Peaceful. But the second I stepped inside, something felt off. You know that feeling when someone's been in your room, even though everything's exactly where you left it? Yeah, that. There was no one thing that jumped out. It was just weird vibes. Too quiet. The cabin was definitely too clean. Like, not just vacuumed, it smelled like bleach and lemon polish, almost aggressively so. And it wasn't a big place, just a living room, kitchenette, bathroom, and a loft bedroom above. No reason to go overboard on cleaning unless you were covering something up. But I brushed it off, tossed my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and cracked open a beer. Long drive. I needed to relax. It was when I walked upstairs to the loft that I noticed the first odd detail. At the top of the stairs, the wall had a mirror. Not a huge one, but placed at eye level, directly facing the bed. Weird angle. Kinda pointless unless you wanted to watch yourself while sleeping. But I shrugged again. People have strange taste. I tossed my duffel on the bed and went back down to grab my camera gear. But as I passed the mirror again, I swear it was tilted just a little to the left, like it had moved. I told myself I was being paranoid. Road fatigue. I was tired, not thinking straight. But by that night, I started to notice more. The fridge had only one bottle of water in it. One. And an unopened container of almond milk. That's it. The trash under the sink was empty, but the bag had been opened. Like someone had taken something out of it, not put something in. I remember this clearly. The toothbrush holder in the bathroom had 2 spots, and only one was empty. But the other one had an indentation, like a toothbrush had just recently been removed. And the biggest thing? The bedroom closet. It was locked. Just a small closet door with a latch and a padlock on it. What kind of Airbnb locks up a tiny closet in a 400-square-foot cabin? Still, I wasn't about to start drilling into the walls or asking questions over a locked closet. I just needed sleep. The place was probably fine. So I did what I always do on the first night in a new Airbnb. I checked for cameras. Call me paranoid, but it's part of my routine. Smoke detectors, vents, clocks, plants. I even unscrewed the bottom of a lamp once, just in case. This cabin? I found nothing. Or so I thought. But I swear to you, when I lay in that bed that night, I felt watched. Not just big windows, was outside watched, but something closer. Inside. I even pulled the curtain across the big window near the bed. But it didn't help. That mirror on the wall? I ended up flipping it to face the wall with a towel over it. I laughed while I did it, thought I was being dramatic. But the next morning, the towel was on the floor, and the mirror was facing back toward the bed. So I wake up, and the towel I definitely draped over the mirror? On the floor. I just stood there for a second, staring at it. Maybe it slipped off, sure. Maybe the mirror was on a slight tilt. But it had been folded over, draped carefully. And now the mirror was angled, again, right back at the bed. Even closer to straight on than the night before. I walked over, slowly, and adjusted it again. This time, I wedged the towel under the mirror's edge and stuck it with one of the cabin's little, welcome to the mountains, magnets I found on the fridge. I tested it. Wouldn't budge. It stayed put. For now. I tried to shake it off. Morning sunlight streamed in. Birds were chirping. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe this place was just old and creaky. I made coffee instant, the kind that tastes like regret, and sat out on the porch scrolling through my emails. I was scheduled to shoot a small outdoor wedding the next day in town. Easy gig. I figured I'd take the afternoon to scout the park location. But the second I stepped back inside, that unease came rushing back like a wave slapping you mid-step. I started noticing little things I hadn't seen before. The walls were cluttered with vintage frames, sure cute, cozy, whatever, but several of them had no pictures. Just faded parchment. I got curious and took one down. The backing was stapled in place, but the paper behind the glass looked like it had writing, and then like someone had scrubbed it off. Another frame had what looked like part of a map, but nothing labeled. I turned it over. No info, no writing. Like someone made it deliberately look interesting, but meaningless. But it wasn't art, it was cover. And then there was the bookshelf. Small shelf near the kitchen, nothing fancy. But I realized every single book on it had a theme. Travel journals, guest memoirs, a couple of self-published books with random titles like Wanderlust for One and Solitude in the Pines. But none of them had authors listed. At all. Just blank spines and no copyright info. I opened one up. Inside were pages. Printed, yes, but interspersed between these generic travel stories were handwritten notes in the margins. Notes like, she likes the couch. Day 3, 2:45 p.m., curled up, reading. Window open again. Doesn't lock it before bed. Why does she always leave the mirror covered? I dropped the book like it burned me. I picked up another, same thing. Different handwriting. Different she. One more. This time, the entry stopped mid-sentence. Like someone had been writing and interrupted. At this point, I was starting to spiral. I felt like the walls were pressing in. Like I was being watched even in that moment. I checked the closet door again. Still locked. Still mocking me. The kind of old padlock that looked like it had been there for years. I texted the host. Kept it light. Hey, just wondering about the locked closet upstairs. Should I be avoiding it, or is it just storage? No answer. Not for hours. Meanwhile, I started making a mental checklist of everything that felt wrong. The hyper-clean smell, too strong to be normal. The weird books with voyeur notes. The mirror, which had moved again, I swear to God, even though I hadn't touched it since pinning the towel. Then I heard something. A faint thud above me. I froze. Looked up. Now here's the layout. The loft bedroom is the topmost part of the cabin. There's no attic. Nothing should be above it. Just slanted roof and sky. And yet thud. Like a soft, deliberate step. Or something falling gently. I crept upstairs. Every stair creaked like it knew I was being hunted. When I got to the top, I braced for, I don't know what. But the room was empty. Window closed. Nothing on the floor. The towel on the mirror? Still there. I almost laughed in relief. Until I noticed something on the edge of the bed. A single strand of hair. Black. Long, definitely not mine. And I don't mean maybe it's from the cleaner, not mine. I have light brown, shaved sides. This was at least 10 inches long and tucked neatly into the fold of the blanket. Like it was placed there. I grabbed my phone and took a picture. I needed proof. For what? I wasn't sure yet. Just a record. If I was losing my mind, I wanted receipts for the descent. It was around then that I realized I needed to leave. Or at least go into town for a while. Take my laptop to a coffee shop, grab lunch, breathe. I left everything there except my camera bag and laptop. Locked the cabin behind me. Walked to my car. And that's when I noticed it. Under my windshield wiper? A postcard. No postage, no writing on the back. Just a glossy photo of the exact cabin I was staying in. Same angle as the Airbnb listing photo, but slightly off. Like it had been taken more recently. A branch was missing. A rock had moved. I turned it over, my hands shaking. On the back, in pencil, it said, "You photograph well." So I'm sitting in my car. Postcard in hand. "You photograph well." That's what it said. And maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a weird coincidence. Maybe a neighbor with a bad sense of humor. But after the books, the mirror, the hair, the noises, and now this? I wasn't waiting to find out. I drove straight to a little cafe in town. The kind with Wi-Fi, banana bread that looks better than it tastes, and baristas who wear beanies indoors like it's a religion. I sat there for almost 3 hours, sipping the same coffee until it went cold. I kept checking my phone. Still nothing from the host. Around 4 p.m., I got the ping. "Hey, sorry, just seeing this. The closet's just storage. Old linens and stuff. Nothing important." That's all it said. I read it 3 times. And something about it didn't sit right. Just storage. Nothing important. That's not how people talk about locked things in a guest space. That's how you wave someone away from a room you don't want them to see. I made a choice right there. I wasn't spending another night in that cabin without knowing what the hell was going on. So I stopped by a hardware store on my way back. Bought a cheap bolt cutter, no questions asked, and a fresh roll of duct tape, just in case I wanted to cover every reflective surface before bed. When I pulled up to the cabin, it looked still, like it hadn't moved since I left. And yet, the moment I stepped inside, I could feel that same static energy again, like the room was holding its breath. I went straight upstairs, bolt cutter in hand. The mirror still had the towel, but it had shifted again. Not enough to fall, just enough to peek from the corner. But I ignored it. I crouched at the closet. Old brass lock. Rusted, but solid. Clack. One squeeze. It snapped. I pulled open the door. The smell hit me first, like old paper and dust, and something chemical. The closet was barely the size of a small pantry. Shelves from floor to ceiling. And on those shelves, stacks of folders. Manila, old, worn, labeled with dates and first names. Julie, September 2020. Erica, January 2021. Tanya, November 2022. And then, my name, spelled perfectly. Lena, April 2024. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before I touched it. Inside, dozens of cutout photos. From online, I think, some clearly from my photography website, others from my public Instagram. Me holding a camera. Me at a beach. One from a wedding I'd shot in Arizona, a private event. But then, there were printed screenshots from my Airbnb messages. My profile photo. My reviews. Notes written in red ink on the edges. She travels often. Solo. Usually quiet. Responds within 20 minutes. Polite. Punctual. Photographs others. Rarely in frame herself. Interesting. I flipped the next page. Photos of me. But not ones I'd ever posted. Me, brushing my teeth in a hotel. Me, walking out of a gas station. Me, in a coffee shop 2 states away. Me, loading gear into my trunk, from behind. They weren't selfies. They were surveillance shots. I felt my stomach lurch. I flipped to the final page and felt the breath leave my body. It was a full-color printout, grainy, but unmistakable. Me, lying in the bed upstairs. Eyes closed, clearly asleep. And the timestamp? 12:42 a.m. The night before. I dropped the folder. Backed away like it might bite me. Every part of my body was shaking. I felt cold, despite the heat trapped in the cabin. My hands, my arms, I couldn't stop them from trembling. There were other folders. Dozens. And I couldn't stomach going through them all, but I peeked into one. It belonged to Natalie, June 2023. Same pattern. Photos. Notes. Surveillance. Schedules. Except one page in her folder had a printed return plane ticket. Crossed out in red. Another note. She left early. Bad timing. Do not rebook. The floor creaked behind me. I spun around. Nothing. But I didn't wait. I grabbed my folder and bolted. Down the stairs. Out the door. Threw my things in the car. Peeled out of the gravel driveway like the devil himself was chasing me. I didn't stop driving until I hit the next state. I pulled into a motel, some crusty roadside place with flickering neon and cigarette burns on the blankets. And I didn't care. I just needed light. Locks. People. Noise. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there, clutching the folder, staring at the ceiling, wondering how long I'd been followed. How they found those photos. Who they even were. And the worst part? That Airbnb? Still listed. Still online. The morning after I ran, I sat on the motel bed, folder beside me, coffee untouched, staring at my phone. The Airbnb listing was still up, still accepting bookings. The reviews? All glowing. 5 stars. Clean, charming, super private. A few guests even said the host left handwritten notes welcoming them. I scrolled to the bottom and hit Contact Host. I didn't message through Airbnb. I used the number in the original confirmation email. Texted first. Hi. We need to talk. Now. Read. No reply. So I called. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Then again. On the 4th try, someone picked up. And I swear to you, they were already breathing before they spoke. No hello. Just a pause. And then, you shouldn't have opened the closet. Just like that. I froze. My mouth went dry. All I could say was, who the hell are you? The voice was odd. Calm. Almost measured. Like someone reading from a cue card. Not robotic, but rehearsed. Like they'd had this conversation before. They didn't answer my question. You left in a hurry, they said. You forgot your water bottle. My head snapped toward the motel nightstand. My water bottle was there. So were my bags. Everything I'd packed. Except, I had left a second one by the bed. A cheap plastic backup I kept for long shoots. I hadn't even realized it was missing. What do you want from me? I asked. The voice gave a small sigh, like I was the one being difficult. You were being documented. That's all. For what? Observation. Nothing harmful. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's what people do when they're about to lose it. You had photos of me sleeping. That's not observation. That's stalking. That's AF *ing felony. ***. A beat of silence. And then, they said, you opted in. I didn't understand. I said, what are you talking about? And then they read something out loud. By booking this property, guest consents to observational data collection for non-invasive behavioral study purposes. Guests will not be contacted or interfered with. All data remains anonymous. I felt my stomach twist. That clause wasn't in the listing. At least, not anymore. But when I checked the confirmation email, buried in the fine print under the house rules section, there it was. In tiny font. Next to no parties, no smoking, pets allowed. I had signed off on it. I hadn't read it. I never do. Who does? I started yelling into the phone, demanding answers. Who was conducting the study? Where were the cameras? Were there more folders? The voice only said, your folder has been removed. No further contact will be made. We suggest you move on. You're telling me to forget it? I snapped. Forget you broke into my privacy, tracked me across state lines, photographed me while I slept. Click. They hung up. That's when the adrenaline left me, and I just sat there, breathing heavy, heart racing, staring at my phone like it might explode. I filed a report with the police that afternoon. I showed them the photos, the folder, the note on the postcard, even the broken padlock I'd taken with me. But it didn't go anywhere. Because the observation clause was technically in the rental agreement, and I had signed it, even if I didn't read it. The photos? Hard to prove how or where they were taken. None were explicitly illegal. Creepy, yes. Disturbing, absolutely. But not enough for a warrant. They opened a case. That was it. I flagged the listing on Airbnb, submitted everything I had. The next day, the listing vanished. Not deleted. No longer available. A week later, a new cabin popped up in the same area. Same layout. Different name. Same style of photos. Like it was trying just hard enough to look different. Like changing the label on the same jar. I tried contacting Airbnb again. Nothing. I tried messaging the new host. No reply. I even found a Reddit thread. A post from another solo traveler who stayed in a forest cabin and talked about a weird locked closet and a mirror that seemed to move. The post had one reply. You photograph well. Same words. Same formatting. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't the only one. This wasn't just some creepy host. This was a system. It's been 3 months since I left that cabin. I still haven't deleted the photos from the folder. I still have the physical copy in a locked drawer. I keep telling myself I'm going to burn it, toss the whole thing in a fire pit, and pretend it never happened. But I don't. Because deep down, I don't think it's over. Here's what happened after I left the motel. I got a call, not from the police, not from Airbnb, but from a private investigator. Yeah, I know. I didn't believe it at first either. But he knew things I hadn't posted online. Specifics from the booking, the cabin layout, the exact phrasing from the clause buried in the house rules. He asked if I'd meet in person. Neutral spot. Daytime. Public. We met at a Panera of all places. He was older, looked tired. Not the trench coat and fedora type. More like someone's uncle who listens to too much true crime. He told me he'd been tracking a pattern for the past year. Dozens of similar properties. Same setup. Seemingly normal listings. Always remote. Always just a little too clean. Same clause, buried in the fine print. Always solo travelers. He showed me a map, pins across 6 states. Most of them had been pulled from Airbnb within days of someone asking questions. Not removed for violations. Just temporarily unavailable. Who's behind it? I asked him. He hesitated. Then said, a company. Or something calling itself that. Apparently, the cabins are part of a shell operation. Each property under a different owner name. Payments routed through crypto wallets. They hosts were either fake identities or people paid to pose as owners. Some didn't even exist, automated replies, canned responses. And the data? That's the scary part. They weren't just filming for voyeur kicks. They were studying behavior. When people locked doors, how they moved through unfamiliar spaces, what time they woke up, what they looked at first thing in the morning, what they ignored, what they noticed. It was all logged, observed, tracked. I asked him flat out. Why? What's the point? His answer? Predictive profiling. Consumer behavior. Maybe blackmail. Maybe worse. Truth is, nobody's talking. Because no one's ever caught them in the act. Not yet. He said I was lucky, Because I noticed. Most people don't. They come, they stay, they leave glowing reviews. And those who do notice? I asked. He looked at me like he didn't want to answer. Some go silent. Delete their accounts. Vanish from online. One woman changed her name. I told him about the Reddit post, the one with the same comment I got. He nodded. Said the phrase, "you photograph well," had come up 6 times that he could confirm. Here's the part that chills me the most. He leaned across the table, lowered his voice, and said, "There's one other thing." He opened a folder. Not unlike the one I found in that closet. Inside? Photos. Dozens. Of people I didn't know. Men, women, all alone. Some candid, some clearly sleeping. Then, one that stopped my breath. It was me. Not from the cabin. Not even from this trip. From a shoot I did in Oregon 2 years ago. Someone had been tracking me longer than I thought. I pushed the folder back, my hand shaking. So what do I do now? I asked him. He just shook his head. You watch your back. You check every outlet, every mirror, every smoke detector, every closet. You don't book through Airbnb anymore. You pay in cash when you can. And you never, ever let your guard down in a place that's too quiet. We parted ways after that. He told me he'd keep in touch if anything broke. So far, nothing. Airbnb never followed up. The listing, as far as I can tell, is gone, or recycled under a new name. I've switched to hotels now. Chain hotels. Places with lobby cameras and check-in desks and other human beings in sight. But the thing that really messes with me? Sometimes, in my emails. Buried in the spam folder. I still get messages with no subject line. No sender info. Just a body of text. One sentence. You photograph well. Check your mirrors. Lock your closets. And always, always read the fine print.